Hi, I'm Steve Casely from CPT Nuggets, and welcome to this nugget continuing through a review of the primary Prince2 deliverables, and this is part 2 of 4, reviewing all of the Prince2 deliverables. And in this nugget, we're going to review 6 more deliverables. Continuing alphabetically, the first nugget in this series is End of Project Report, specifically calling out, summarizing the results of the project, summarizing the lessons learned from the project, and presenting a very formal document to the project board, to senior management, outlining exactly how well the project achieved its purpose. And very similar to that is the end of stage report. And as we get into the details of these two deliverables, you'll see a lot of similarity, but a little bit of uniqueness in that the end of stage report is going to have a little extra material. Believe it or not, the end of project report is the more succinct of the two because it's simply summarizing what we've done on the project, where the end of stage report summarizes what we've done, but also has a bit of a future look into what's going to happen on the next stages. The report we all hope we never have to produce is the exception report, outlining why we had exceptions, why we had a measurement for our project that went out of tolerance, and what the actions we're going to take to do to resolve the exception. The highlight report, we previously looked at the checkpoint report, which I would describe as my weekly status report. The highlight report is a more summarized status report, probably would be developed on a monthly basis. And then two deliverables that are very related. The issue log, which is a spreadsheet that's going to track all of the issues and risks on our project, and a specific issue report, which is a detailed document to truly track and manage the activities on each issue or risk. The log tracks all of them over the life of the project, and the issue report is unique to each issue and risk on your project. And our first deliverable review is the end of project report. This is the deliverable that we produce at the end of the project to summarize how well the project performed. Our table of contents, project manager's report, review of business case, review of project objectives, how well did we work against our objectives, review of the team performance, what recommendations do we have for improving team performance, and recognizing those that performed very well, summary of the lessons learned, and a summary of all of the products delivered on the project. But let's look at each of these sections in just a little more detail. So the project manager's report. Summarize the overall project performance, highlighting the challenges and the lessons learned. And the key is, assume that this is going to be the only part of the report that's going to be read by the executives. So put a lot of time into creating a very accurate and meaningful summary of the project. And that should be no different than the standard rules of engagement for any executive summary. Assume that it is the only thing that the key executives in your organization are going to read. I'm not going to call my executives lazy. I'm going to call my executives very busy. And I'm going to recognize that they probably don't have time to read this lengthy report I'm going to produce for them. So I'm going to spend considerable time creating a really good and effective summary, or in this case, the project manager's report. But let's look at what we do in details for this particular report. Review of the business case. Here we're going through and we're validating whether or not we've achieved the results that the business wanted. Now, the business case, if you remember back to our last nugget, provides the overall objectives for the project. So we're going to review and determine whether, from the functional viewpoint, the project has achieved what it is the business wanted it to do. Because we're going to have changes, we're going to have deviations, we're probably going to have some compromises throughout the project that's going to change the overall flavor of the project slightly. So let's just validate that, in fact, the business is truly happy from a functional viewpoint, and also summarize the benefits achieved. The business expected to achieve all of these benefits. That was the selling point. That's what they used to justify the project. So have we achieved all of those benefits? But recognizing that the end of project report is typically produced very soon after the project is completed, and some of those benefits may take some time until the project has been in production for months or even a year before the benefits are fully realized. So there will still be a bit of projection related to validating whether the benefits have been achieved or not. Moving on, we look at the review of the project objectives. How well did the project do overall? That was from the business viewpoint. Now we're looking at it from the project viewpoint. How well did I do against the schedule? How well did I do against my budget? Did I achieve all the quality expectations? Did I identify and do effective risk management? Do I have specifically items that the project did well on? And this is not the lessons learned. We're going to look at the lessons learned in just a moment. But how well did I compare against the baseline? I said this project was going to be done in 6 months. Was it completed in 6 months plus or minus a day or two? Or was it 8 months or was it 2 months? I said the project was going to take $50,000 and so on and so on. So this is where we're truly reviewing and validating our project's performance against the baseline. And then we move on, review of the team performance. How well did the team do? Do I have any specific improvements that I can do for the next project to improve overall team performance? And recognizing this is where we get the chance to complete teams evaluations. And I'm not going to say individual team evaluations need to go into my project report. As a matter of fact, they shouldn't be. They're a confidential document that's shared with HR. But at the time you're completing the end of project report, you should also be completing your end of project team performance evaluations and recognizing any team members that have made very specific contributions and therefore need specific recognition for those contributions. Now we're going to do our lessons learned, summarize all of the lessons learned, include the root cause analysis and the recommendations so that, again, that this particular chapter of the end of project report can be pulled out and taken to a corporate best practices repository so that overall your organization is going to improve in its effectiveness as a result of your lessons learned. And then finally, a review of the products. And I'm saying this is just a cut and paste of the appropriate sections of the configuration log. The configuration log had a detailed track of all of the CI items for the project. Some of the CI items on your project may not warrant carrying forward and cutting and pasting into the end of project review. Some of them are going to be interim deliverables. Some of them are going to be working papers from the team. But any of the key products that the project delivered, cut and paste those sections from your CI log and put them in here, and then you have a permanent record that the analysis document was delivered on, X date, and the final release was 2.4, so that when people are going looking for the analysis document from your project, they know specifically which version, which date they should be looking for. That's the end of project report. And our next deliverable is the end of stage report. And as I said, it's very similar to the end of project report. Matter of fact, a lot of similarity with the table of contents, the project manager's report, the review of the business case, the review of the stage objectives, the review of the team performance, and the lessons learned are very similar. And then we slip a couple of new items in to review the current issues and risks associated with the project to date and to validate the issues and risks. And the future-facing component of the end of stage report is the updated project forecast. And if we look at these in just a little more detail, the project manager's report, same thing. This is the only piece of the end of stage report that in a lot of instances the senior executives are going to look at. So make sure that you've put a good job of putting it together. The review of the business case, pretty well the same concept that we talked about in the earlier in the project report. We're validating whether the business case has been achieved from a functional and expected benefits viewpoint, but we need to recognize that most of the benefits, or probably all of the benefits, will not even be realized until the project is fully completed. So therefore, we're still doing that future projection. Based on the information I know now about how well the project is delivering, I still have confidence that the project will achieve all of these benefits, and we need to pay very particular attention to the cost element component of the business case because our project is still in flight. So therefore, we need to ensure that the updated project costs are still in line with overall management approval. The review of the stage objectives, very much similar to what we would have done with the end of project, reviewing our performance and understanding how we're doing against our project tolerances. Did we come within a 0.04% of exceeding our budget tolerance, our schedule tolerance during the stage? Could be a sign that we need to pay a little more attention, or were all of our tolerances well within our range? Review of the team performance, recognize that we're probably not going to do individual team performance evaluations mid-project. We still need to look at what the performance of the team is overall, and do we need to make improvements for the next stage. And even now, if we had a team member who excelled during this particular stage of the project, it's well worth calling it out and getting them some special recognition. Lessons learned, again, more focused on process improvement so we don't repeat the same mistakes and we do repeat the same success factors in the next stage. It's worthy of taking just a few minutes to do that lessons learned at the end of every stage, as consistent with what we've already discussed with our end of stage process anyway. And then the issues and risks. This is the new piece. This is different than what we had with the end of project report. We want to review and validate all of the opens, issues, and risks for the project to ensure ongoing relevance. And again, consistent with the discussion we had at the end of stage process, we need to spend considerable time at the end of every stage reviewing and validating and getting a better understanding of how well the project is doing and whether the issues and risks are relevant, whether we should be adding new issues and risks, or whether we should simply be saying, still a lot of them out there. I wish they would go away, but that's life as a project manager, and I will continue. And then the forward-facing aspect for our end-of-stage report, recognizing that a detailed planning session is going to take place as part of planning the next stage. That's not what this is talking about. This is going back and validating, updating the forecast that says, okay, I now completed stage X. My budget for stage X was $30,000. I actually spent $41,000, just under my tolerance. I didn't have to go to an exception report. So therefore, I have improved actuals to put into my forward-facing forecast so that when I add in my updated plans for the remaining phases, I can get a very realistic forecast for what the remaining of the project is going to be. And then finally, as in the last one, a review of the products, and we're going to cut and paste the appropriate sections from the configuration log and paste it into this particular document. End of stage, very similar to the end of project, simply a little more detail to deal with the fact that the project is still in flight, and we need to recognize how we're going to continue to successfully deliver our project. And now the dreaded exception report, the report that we all hope we never have to produce on our project because we hope we never hit an out of tolerance delivery situation, but recognizing that an out of tolerance delivery situation is probably inevitable at some point in a project. I'm going to say we probably will be producing at least an exception report per project, and maybe you're a far better project manager than I am, and you don't do an exception report on project. But my experience is there's going to be some kind of a delivery challenge that we're going to want to get senior management engaged for, and therefore, again, there will most likely be an exception report produced, not daily. I certainly hope you don't go that far, but certainly a need to produce an exception report, on a regular basis, once or twice per project. The executive summary, again, is going to be a key part of our exception report. We're producing the exception report so that senior management, our project board, is aware of the exception and can help us out. So it requires some care and attention, and then we're going to get into the specifics of the exception. What happened? What was the cause? Why are we out of tolerance? What are the impacts of the out of tolerance? What are the corrective actions taken or could be taken? What's our recommendation? And then again, a summary of the lessons learned. So if we look at each of these in a little more detail, the executive summary is a key portion of the report. As I said, In some instances, if it's a minor exception, or if it's an exception that senior management know is going to be dealt with effectively by the project board, it's probably going to be the only piece of this document that they're going to read. So we want to make sure that the exception report executive summary is well written and that it truly carries forward all of the salient points related to this particular exception that we're expecting management to deal with. And then we get into the details of it, the exception cause. What happened? Where are we out of tolerance? Have we got a schedule variance? Do we have a cost variance? Do we have a risk variance? Do we have a quality variance? Why are we out of tolerance? And more specifically, a review of the root causes as to why we're out of tolerance. We're out of tolerance on the schedule because we had learning curve issues, because we had unavailability of the business, because we had. So we're going to go through and we're going to understand and do a very thorough job of presenting all of the causes for the exception, why we're out of tolerance. And then obviously we need to understand the impacts of that. So for all of the causes and all of the impacts to the project, we're going to do a presenting of all of the current impacts. So as a result of all of those problems that we just discussed, we know we're at a tolerance, and here is the impact of being at a tolerance. And we also want to look at the projected. And if this isn't corrected, if this continues unabated, we have an expectation that there's going to continue to be some substantial delivery challenges on the project. And this is, again, the incentive to senior management, to our project board, to help us deal with this particular exception. And then the all-important, the corrective actions. Present as many corrective actions as we can. There's often more than one way, and often we're going to get the most effective solution if we present multiple ways to deal with a specific exception. And I suggest some form of numerical evaluation of each action against a common evaluation criteria. So we're going to come up with a common evaluation criteria. What is the impact on team? What is the impact on risk? What is the impact on quality of solution? What is the impact on speed? What is the impact on? What is the impact on? Come up with 4 or 5 or 6 evaluation criteria. And I haven't specifically called them out because depending on the nature of the exception, you're going to come up with very different evaluation criteria. So there's not one set of evaluation criteria that can be applied in all instances, but come up with 5 or 6 evaluation criteria and then rank them. The impact on schedule is most important, so I'm going to rank it a 5, and the impact on the team is the least important, so I'm going to rate it a 2. And then we evaluate each of our corrective actions. If we take this corrective action, it's going to give me a 3 on schedule, so I do a 3 times 5, and I give it a weighted value of 15. And it's going to have a significant impact on the team, so I'm going to give a 5 times 1, which was its weight, to give me, and then we can do the math, and we can make providing the recommendation far more subjective and far less objective. And that leads to our next piece, which is the recommendation. Select and recommend the best recommendation, presumably based on our numerical analysis, but be sure to include the pros and cons of implementing the selected alternative. Just because it ranked the highest doesn't mean it's not without its own challenges. So make sure we're calling out and making clear all of the challenges we're going to have with implementing our recommended solution. And then finally, we're going to summarize any specific lessons learned as a result of doing all of this work so that we can improve our corporate best practices, and we certainly can improve our project delivery situation. The exception report. And next we're going to look at the highlight report. As I said in my introduction, we've already reviewed the checkpoint report. I would suggest the checkpoint report is the detailed, granular status report that you're going to present to your project acceptor and your key project stakeholders, probably on a weekly basis and certainly on a very frequent basis. But by the very name, the highlight report is going to be produced less frequently, is going to be at a higher level of summary, and would be produced, I would suggest, monthly to the more senior stakeholders, to the more senior members of your project board, and certainly to your senior management in your organization. So what are we going to have in our highlight report? We're going to have a very complete status report summary. And those two terms are almost in conflict with each other. How can it be very complete and a summary? Meaning it's going to take us some time and attention to put together a really good project report summary, but recognize that this is going to senior management. It's really worth the time. It's worth agonizing for a few minutes or even a half hour or an hour once a month over producing a really powerful, very, very well written status report summary. And we're going to provide a brief summary of the overall project status. How well have we done to date? And more specifically, we're going to provide a detailed summary of the project's progress since the last report. So how are we doing overall? But more specifically, what have we done since I last reported to you? Then we're going to provide a schedule update. And I'm going to suggest the schedule update is based on key project milestones. They don't want to know that Johnny's working on Module 15 and Sally's doing QA and peer review, but they want to recognize how well we're doing against key project milestones. We completed design, we're in analysis, sorry, wrong way around. We completed analysis and we're in design, and we are 35% through design. In parallel, we're also doing test plan preparation, and we're 18% through test plan preparation. So when we're providing a summary of the schedule, key project milestones only, and although Steve is not a fan of a percent complete basis, I find percent complete is perfect for reporting to senior management. I just don't like percent complete when I'm dealing with a team member. I want real actuals, but I actually encourage using percent complete on our project milestones for executive reporting. And we're going to provide a budget summary. Provide a summary of the project budget, again, based on key budget categories. We're going to probably 5 or 6 key budget categories. How am I doing on my team's salaries? How am I doing on external contractors? How am I doing on data center costs? How am I doing on hardware? So again, 5 or 6, probably no more than 10 key budget categories. Here's my plan. Here's my spend to date. Here's any variances. And then we're going to start to provide some project details. Here's my deliverable product update. So here are the key products / deliverables. And this may look very familiar. In fact, this is a cut and paste from my checkpoint report. Remember, Steve is lazy. Steve likes to cut and paste and consolidate as much as possible. But here are the key deliverables that I'm going to produce. And I'm going to say this is the deliverables that I've produced to date. Sorry, not to date. In this reporting period, here are all of the deliverables produced this month. And here are my plans for the next month. And senior management is certainly going to be concerned about any of the project tolerances. So again, a direct cut and paste. This is only going to be 6 or 7 lines anyway. So this is one of those instances where it's a direct cut and paste from my checkpoint report, and I'm going to put it into my highlight report to let senior management know how well I'm doing against my project tolerances. Because change is inevitable, it warrants calling out the changes and listing all of the changes that have been processed during the current period. We have processed changes for this and this and this. The total value is going to be. And finally, not a detailed risk report. I don't want to show my whole risk register, but I'm going to list any key issues and risks and any corrective actions being taken so that senior management is aware that Steve has a handle on his project, is tracking and managing risks, and in fact, here are all of the actions taken. So the highlight report, I'm going to say very brief. Hopefully it's only going to be a page or 2 long, highlighting how well the project is performing over, I'm going to say, an extended period of time. Again, I would expect your highlight report is going to be produced on a monthly basis and going to go to senior management. And our next key Prince2 deliverable is one of these working deliverables. This is simply something we're going to maintain within the project space itself. And this is our issue and risk log. And this is a perpetual, ongoing, updated frequently list of all of the issues and risks that the project is tracking, including all of the issues and risks that have been closed to completion. My recommendation is we always create an issue or a risk number, simply because the issue and risk description will typically get long, and therefore copying and pasting the issue and risk name forward every time we're trying to report on it gets tedious. And yes, it requires people to remember that risk 15 is team learning curve and issue 94 is overall system performance. But within a very short period of time of reporting on the issues and risks, senior management and the project board is going to very quickly stop calling them by name and say, Steve, how are we doing on risk 15? It's just the shorter way to do it. So again, I find that people will gravitate very quickly to the short form issue number, or if that's not working, I would find a very short form name, 2 or 3 words to describe the issue or risk, so that we have a very quick way to refer to it. Then we get into the full issue risk description. And obviously it's going to be a little bit bigger than a single line in the spreadsheet, but we know spreadsheet cells can grow and take up a full page if we have to. But we're going to provide a very complete, robust description of the issue and risk so that we then can clearly articulate and understand what issue 15 is, or what risk 15 is, and what issue 99 is. We need to categorize what type of document we're dealing with. Is this a risk? A risk is a future concern. An issue is an immediate concern. Or we have a concern. I used the word concern there maybe too many times. A risk and issue are quantified, identified, true project challenges. A concern is the initial identification of an issue or a risk that hasn't been fully validated yet. And we have our Prince2 term of an off specification. We have work that's performing that's not consistent with where we want to be, so we have to take corrective actions. We have a status. It's in progress, it's active, it's pending, it's closed. We want to always track how actively we're managing everything in our issue and risk log, so we're going to have a last update date. We're going to need to understand how old it is, how long has this issue risk been outstanding. We're going to identify who identified it, and we're going to put a priority and a severity on it. So this is a high priority. It's something we need to be taking action on, and this is a very high severity. This is like our impact and our probability matrix that we use when we're doing risk analysis. Just a little more universal, so that we can truly make sure we're focused on the right issues and risks, and that the ones and ones, that's a low priority, low severity, will get dealt with when we have time, but may not get a lot of attention on the project. And most importantly, and again, this is going to grow more than a few characters in a single row in a spreadsheet, what's the current action? And I actually recommend that we keep all current actions and we keep a log of. So this particular risk, on June the 15th, this is the current action. On June the 30th, here's the current action. On July the 12th, here's the current action. And just allow this particular cell to grow and grow and grow until finally we're able to take the status and move it to closed. The issue and risk log is very much a working document, needs to be front and center in the project, and needs to be reviewed by us, the project managers, on a regular basis to make sure that nothing is slipping through the cracks. And our final deliverable in this nugget is the issue and risk report, and this is an instance of putting the cart before the horse. We just reviewed the issue log, where we're tracking the issues. In fact, we would produce this issue and risk report long before, I shouldn't say long before, but at the same time it's being issued into the log. Again, we simply reviewed the log before the report because it came first in the alphabet. No order of precedence. The issue and risk log is an important document, as it's going to allow us to track a little more detail about each issue and risk than we are able to maintain in that tracking spreadsheet we just looked at. So we're going to have the identification information. What project are we working on? Here's that risk ID, the very short, it's risk 15 or issue 99, or worst case, a very, very short, brief description of it. What type of issue? Again, is it an issue? Is it a risk? Is it a concern? Is it an off-spec? And here's the detailed name, the priority, the severity, and the identified by. The same sort of information we already had, and this would be a pure cut and paste from this tombstone information of the issue risk report onto our log. But the detail in this particular document is here, where we will truly provide a lot more detail than we're ever going to track in the log itself. This is the working paper to be maintained for each issue, risk, concern, OS specification, and we're going to go through a very detailed description, and we're talking paragraphs of information here, not a quick summary into the log. The issue or the impact analysis, again, is going to be a very detailed. Here is some very thoughtful review of the issue or risk. Here's the impact analysis. Here's the recommended actions. Doesn't need to get as comprehensive as some of the recommended actions that we did in our exception report. We're not going to necessarily, it's fine if you want to, but you don't necessarily need to get into the full numerical analysis of coming up with evaluation criteria, but we're going to provide some detailed recommendations of how we should be dealing with resolving this issue or risk. And finally, here's our recommended decision, and here is our approval to proceed to implement the decision. So the issue and risk report should be one per issue or risk, so that we have a detailed log and a detailed analysis of how we're going to clear and resolve all of these. And then the highlights of this are put into the log so that we have that running material to track and manage all of the issues and risks on our project. This concludes our second nugget reviewing the key Prince2 deliverables. In this nugget, we reviewed 6 more deliverables. We reviewed 2 very similar deliverables, the end of project report and the end of stage report. The first components of each of these reports is identical. We're going to have a key executive summary. We're going to present the overall results of either the stage or the project. How well did we do against our baseline? How well did we achieve our project's expectations? A review of our performance against the business case to validate that the project is still on track. And then the stage report is going to have a couple more sections in our table of contents to review and validate our issues and risks, that the project is still going to be able to be delivered successfully, and a bit of a forward-reaching evaluation of whether the project still is going to achieve its objectives based on our project's performance to date. We reviewed the report that we all as project managers hope we never have to produce, which is our exception report, which is produced 1 per exception when the project hits a tolerance variance. It's greater than my ability to manage as a project manager. My budget has gone out of tolerance. My schedule has gone out of tolerance. I'm going to produce a very thoughtful exception report to identify all of the reasons why my tolerance variance has happened, and all of the actions that I can get help from my project board, from senior management, to resolve and to bring the project back into line. We've reviewed a highlight report, which I would call my monthly project status report, which provides a more summarized status of the project than my checkpoint report. We reviewed 2 related documents again, the issue log, which is a working spreadsheet, which is going to have a 1 line per issue and risk to validate that we have a track of, that we're effectively managing all our project issues and risks. And then finally, we're going to have the detailed issue report that's going to be a multiple page, or at least a 1-pager, with all of the details around what the issue risk is, what are the corrective actions that we can be taken, and how are we going to resolve it. This concludes our nugget review in the next 6 of the Prince2 deliverables. I hope this module has been informative for you, and thank you very much for viewing.